All right, welcome to Raw Automation Talk. I'm Brent Wiederholt. I'm here with Johnny Jones, and today we actually have a special guest, Mark O'Donovan. Mark, real quick, I just wanted to let everybody know, like how I know you and that kind of stuff. Whatever, I actually know you from the Discord server. So, um, actually, let me pull this up. I want to, probably nobody knows about this, but let's see. Let me go to the Discord server real quick and share my screen. But Mark, Johnny, maybe you don't spend a whole lot of time on Discord or not. Sometimes you do. But look at this. It's like 611 times. So anyway, he's the poster. So anyway,
Yeah.
I did get a hold of Mark. Mark, you kind of you were actually engaging and everything else. You wanted to talk about some automation. So anyway, we came up with an idea that we would just kind of like, here's the scenario. Here's like if we were called up, this is the plan. What would be, if there was a digital transformation that has already been done, how would you go about how to abstract some of this plant floor data? So Mark actually did a really good job. He writes it up, and I could have put together a presentation, so that's what I'll probably end up doing. Mark, do you have anything that you would like to start with, or?
I came up with it, and I didn't kind of go any further.
Well, then,
You know,
yeah, and then so then perfect. So then what I'll do is I'll go through mine, and then you guys can stop me and argue with me, and give me a hard time. So I don't know. I'll go from there and start.
yeah.
But to go back to get your background. So and yeah, let's talk about this real quick. So I am definitely ignition biased. You would call it. So lots of ignition work, that kind of stuff. Whatever. My background, I've done Wonderware. Um, let's see, Iconics, there's a long list anyway. But so been in the automation world for about 20 years, so I've touched quite a bit. So Mark, what kind of your background?
Yeah. So I suppose I've been professionally an engineer for the last 20 years, but I suppose half of that has been automation, and a little more than half now, and some of it has been electrical instrumentation, up to kind of high voltage wind farm design, um, through different machinations. So, and the automation side of it, let's just keep it to that. It was very much Siemens, Allen Bradley, Wonderware, WinCC they were the bread and butter. You know, anything else was maybe one project, and you've got to learn how to use a new PLC, and then you forget it. Um, and I like Wonderware. I love System Platform. I can't use it now commercially because I'm just me to fork out a development license, and it's just not going to happen. Now I don't do that much developing, but if you came to me and said, Mark, we need you to build a SCADA tomorrow, I'd have to go with Ignition. I have to. There's really, obviously I can go with something else, but practically I can go it up. I don't have to pay for a license. I can start developing. There's great resources available. So I'm going to do it that way. So it's not the technology of Ignition. I look at it and, yeah, it's good. It does what it does. But it's everything else. They've got everything else perfect. And if System Platform was to the same extent, and you could get a license, you could develop, and you could get resources, I think people really would get into it. I do have to get into frameworks. I think that might be my sweet spot, but I just haven't had the time to learn how to use it. So that's kind of my background. And as I said to people, a lot of my automation for a long time was putting liquids through pipes, dairies, breweries, fizzy drinks, that distilleries, those sorts of things. With the machinery side tending to be bottling.
Okay.
You know, that's all of it. The last few years, I've done a few more things kind of in the system architecture. I spent a year working with container terminals, and then the last year or so, kind of projects with medical devices, corrugated paper. Much more that sort of, I think, machinery that a lot of the, let's say, Industry 4.0, I think, UNS community, that's where they're coming from. There's less people, not to say there's none, but there's less people coming from a batch process, fluids, that the farmer even tends to be sort of maybe more discrete farmer as opposed to that continuous. So, that's my background. These days I tend to not be programming. I do some, and I tend to be Node-RED. I love Node-RED. I really do. I really it just clicks in my head. So if you ask me to do something and I can do it in Node-RED, I'll do it in Node-RED.
So wait, I got to go back to the system platform because I walked into a. So here's what happened. Here's my experience with it. Another integrator had installed it, didn't complete the last 10% of it. They brought me in because of my prior processing engineering background, and I sit down and I go, and I went from InTouch, probably like InTouch 9 or 10 or whatever the case is, and they gave me a system platform. It was like Orchestra 3.1, which is super old nowadays. But
okay.
And I was like, what is this? Like, you cannot. I want to scratch. I mean, I'm going to remove this as fast as possible. It was horrible. It wasn't intuitive.
It's not.
InTouch, you can grab a Modbus register and throw a temperature up on a screen within less than a minute.
Yeah.
And you cannot do that with that system platform. It was organization, and I get it. It the Galaxy and it's all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, holy cow! I'm going to have to go to school for this.
So I did a bit of automationing when my first year or two, out of college as an engineer, and that was 2008. I stopped, and then 2014 I went back to the company I used to work for, and I was back using InTouch, which I'd used. And then a couple of projects in, I was introduced to System Platform, and I was there, and I hated it. And I got to realize the reason I didn't like it because it made me do things properly. It made me structure my data. It made me structure my naming convention. It made me do all these things. It didn't allow me to take shortcuts. And over time, that paid off. And if you've got, I was doing a wind farm, single site SCADA, on a PC, InTouch, great. When you're looking at a full dairy and you've got, 7 or 8 SCADA systems that are controlling 7 or 8, plant rooms, which are, each of them is a small factory. You can't get away with that. It's like I always say, if you have a system where you open up 7 different PLCs and the temperature's named different in them all, and in some of them temp is a temperature and some of them is temp is temporary, that's not the right way to do it. Now, Ignition allows you to do that, I think, but it doesn't kind of force you in the same way System Platform does. But if you've got to do something very big, it really does. And what I really, really love about it, and I always say it was my start of thinking like a system architect, before I started to learn about, different viewpoints and presenting the same system in 5 different drawings. You have, when you build your model, you build your plant model, which is following the RC95 structure and everything's nested. Right. But you also have a derivation model where this pump is derived from the general class pump, which is derived from the object class. So everything is derived. And then you have a deployment view, and it's the same system, just looking at it from different ways. And I went, that's so clever. And I think if you, and it must be coming, please, somebody is working on it, that you can suck your plant model from System Platform out and publish it to an MQC broker. I mean, the structure's there, the data, the structure's there. Just punch it over. And then anyone can use it. that obviously there's problems with it, but I think it's so close. If it was just a bit more open, um, away we'd go. So yeah, excuse me. I feel like I'm the poster boy for system platform. Sometimes I haven't used it in 4 or 5 years probably, but so we must get it. But that structure, because I'm not naturally a good organized person who all my files are in the right place or whatever. So if I can get away with taking a shortcut, I tend to, and then I go back and fix it and go, oh, that's better.
Yes.
So
we actually had this argument or discussion with Johnny last night, and that is, they were talking about releasing a product, right, a software package, whatever, and they're like, well, they're on their third version and they haven't released it, and we're like, no, that's about right, because as soon as you build version 1, you'll be like, okay, now I got the template of it, the functionality of it, but the code behind the scenes is awful, so you got to scratch that. And then by the second time, you're like, okay, I cleaned up half of it. And then the third time, you're finally like, it's stable. It works. It works on every platform. It does all this stuff. So yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, if you worked with any amount of programmers, you'll know that it's like, it's going to take, you don't want version 1.
Oh, no. But even, it's funny. I always say the same thing. And people talk about rollouts, and you bring out a digital transformation, you do plant 1, and they go, "Oh, but plant 2 is going to be easy." I go, no, plant 2 is going to be as hard, because you've got to fix all the stuff you did. You've got to do it. Plant 3, you get a bit ahead of steam up, and you're going. Plant 2, it's different. It's different, but it's not necessarily easier or faster. And you have to fix all the features and put in all the features you said. Let's leave that out of scope now. So right. I think it's the same with coding like that. Yeah, the first one, there's a lot of getting it to work, and you have to get it to work. You do, So, yeah, but
and Johnny, you like were breathing heavy. Did Mark say something that you were like? Have you ever worked with a system platform?
No, I haven't worked with System Platform. I have worked with Aviva Edge, which is the old Indusoft platform. And they've been merging a lot of their InTouch into that system. I was curious, and I was looking it up. You can still go online. Looks like you can download System Platform. I was wondering what their trial period looked like. I know you can
I'll have to look again.
I know you can download Aviva Edge, and it gives you a 48-hour license that you can develop and run on. But I was curious if they did the same thing for System Platform.
I'll have to look. I mean, because System Platform, I think when it first came out, I would have described it like a collection of licenses almost. And the Galaxy bit, in a bit like, I mean, Rockwell. I mean, I like the Rockwell PLCs, but then when you start going, well, this software and this software and this software and this software, and going, why doesn't anything talk to each other? What it's a bunch of softwares that just all seem to be called the same brand. So there's a little bit of that, and I think they've made it more integrated. So it might be harder just to do a little bit. It is hard to do a little bit with System Platform. But I'm gonna make that. I don't think I have a little bit of free time. I as soon as I say this now, it'll change. But I'm not up the walls for the next few weeks, so I've a bit of time to do that research development, look at stuff. I had a plan of stuff I want to do, and maybe we'll look at System Platform at the end of it if we get some time.
So System Platform, and let's talk about this. As functionality wise, what would you say is like? I mean, I know that you haven't done like a large projects with Ignition, but is there any limitations that you see in System Platform, or do you think it takes care of most problems?
I was very, very lucky that I was working with some absolutely rock star System Platform developers. These are guys who you ring up support to ask how to do something, and they're going, but you can't do that. And they're going, no, it is. It's doing that. Breaking the system. Doing it, and okay, not rocket science, but a lot of what we were building an MES on the back end, and it was, you get a script. The script calls your uh, 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 sorry, my brain just stopped working, but your
It just triggers it, right? From
yeah,
some kind of event.
it triggers it. It triggers it, and you have a standard instruction. Your standard instruction does your insert into your SQL database, and yes, SQL Bridge is better than that. But it works. You get it done. You build a good backend. You're away. You can end up with a lot of standard instructions, and you have to manage them. But you have to do that no matter what you do. There's no magic bullet. So I think I don't think there's a problem you couldn't solve with system platform. I certainly don't think there's a problem that system platform can't solve that Ignition can do. Or maybe a better way of putting that is, for a difficult problem, there isn't going to be something that's way, way easier in Ignition than system platform, unless it happens to be, well, they developed a fix for that. So if it was integrating with Canary, yeah, there's a native plugin, so of course it is. But
Right.
for the bigger stuff, if you said you have to build a warehouse management system, or you have to build your maintenance, your CMMS system, something a bit oddball and big, or you want to build a traceability system to track the milk through the dairy, and be able to track it back and forward. I don't think one's going to give you a huge advantage, because you're going to have to break so much out of the box and come up with so much yourself at that level of stuff. Yeah, if you're doing something simple, I mean, both of them, they're both class-based. They're both using reusable models. They're both using, a templateized structure. Neither of them are old style in touch, where everything's a graphic, everything's that. So, I don't think it's worth arguing technically over which one can do more. It's a bit like, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I was having, and one thing that comes up in the Discord I mentioned earlier, a lot of people say, how do I structure my data? Do I put my MES, do I have all my MES data in one place, or do I, in each machine, have my MES data? And I kind of go, it doesn't actually matter. There's advantages to each one there, but for the amount of worry that people have, and the anxiety, and the thinking, if I do this, everything's ruined. Well, no, either can work for you. Either is good. It's a, do you want vanilla or chocolate ice cream question? Both are good. I like them both. I'm going to go with either. Especially getting anxiety over it. So I think with the two of them, if you gave me a greenfield site today to build something, I'd go through Ignition. If I went to somewhere that had system platform, I wouldn't say take that out and put in Ignition. If something had an old version of InTouch, I'd be saying you need to start migrating to either of them. And there's a lot of other SCADAs that I'd say the same for. But in the same way, if someone had WinCC
15 years ago, I would argue against that. I was a pro at InTouch.
Yeah, but 15 years ago, InTouch was cutting edge.
Right.
Yeah.
5 years ago, Johnny, 5 years ago, what would you say? I know the answer to this, but I'm just letting you know.
To what? What would I go?
Yeah. 5 years, 4 years ago, I think I know your answer, which would be Indosoft, right? Which is the edge. And then you would like to go to, what is it, Blue Open Studio?
Well, Blue Open Studio is Proface's rebranded version of Indosoft.
Yeah, and Mark, for a good reason, over the years, I've been, me and Johnny have been arguing in behind the scenes about Ignition for many years. So yeah, and actually,
it's mostly to do with price.
Right, which and Mark, I'll see what your opinion is about this, but they do slightly on the expensive side on the Ignition Edge right off the bat, but it is a good product and it does a lot of things if you're going to use some of those features. But the limitations that they provide forces you into the full version, and of course, when you go to full version, now you're really talking about it. So, can you do a Viva Edge for a lot cheaper for some of the functionality that you need for something super cheap that has low tag count? And the answer is that Ignition doesn't compete in that fashion. It's either full blown SCADA or really good edge devices that pump data up. That's where ignition shines.
Yeah, and when I looked at Ignition, like I said 2016, I was looking hard at Ignition, and this was when I was doing 2 or 3 of these wind farm SCADAs I mentioned a year. And it was cheaper to go with standard in touch. I think 3,500 tag count. That was cheaper licensing. So it didn't make sense for me then to do that and migrate all of my stuff over. So then I would agree. No, yeah, I haven't really done much Ignition Edge. I have seen it's got a good bit cheaper. I think there was a price reduction. I don't know if they brought in more limitations.
No, price
recently.
Increase. Price increase with the functionality got out. Yeah.
Okay.
It used to be only like two PLCs, and now it's unlimited. Used to be there was a larger database where for you can store more data for longer. So that was the 2 features, 2 big major ones.
Well, don't forget the 2 big negatives.
Oh well, I mean, or querying the database, right? So that's And so say if I was going to do a batching system, whatever, for a small mixer, whatever case is, Ignition Edge is just not for it. So how do you become very competitive for something that you need to communicate with or connect to a database? So that's the problem with Ignition Edge.
I think, but the question actually, I think, is how do we build a system that it doesn't matter what our SCADA is at the edge, especially if you're going to have different plants. Or even, actually, we don't have a SCADA here. We have a few HMIs and we have, a Raspberry Pi and Node-RED is running in the background. How do we move away from that? And I don't know if you saw Jeremy from UMH, I can't pronounce his surname. He had a post today, and it was one of those where I went, oh, great, someone else thinks the same as me. And I think what he said about the unified namespace was, it's all old technology, which is what makes it great and what makes it revolutionary. And he was kind of saying, because I know people that go, but there's nothing new here. And depending where you're coming from, that can be very true. That, like, I can show you 2014. I can pull it up because I'm working with the same customer again. These wind farms I mentioned. We were taking all of the data from all of the different sources into an OPC server, pulling it back to a centralized Pi historian at their head office. So they've had that since 2014. It's OPC UA. There's a systemic hierarchy. Everything's named in the right way. Bang, 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 bang. I only heard about a unified namespace last year. No, it's that close. From a concept, from a, we can argue. I mean, let's not open the MQTT versus OPC discussion here. We want to go to bed sometime tonight. I think that's a really good point that he made, was it's actually taking they're concepts that are known in other areas, bringing them together, packaging them well. Now you have something that's really going to work and going to help people.
Yeah. So to go back to it, because here's the problem. In the dream world, say you got a plant, you run into a plant, whatever case is, you're never going to have all Siemens or all Allen Bradley or whatever. And it's going to be panel views and red lines and all kinds of different stuff. So how do you capture all this stuff? You're gonna have some machines that don't even have any type of sensors whatsoever, and so that's a problem within itself. And so how do you centralize it and get it all together and all that kind of stuff? So, yeah, so we do have to be mindful of the realities of what we've got. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean,
well,
there's a place for everything.
Right. Well, if you guys are ready, I can go through my presentation and you guys can, tear it apart. And...
I feel like someone who didn't do their homework
for
this presentation.
No. I mean, these just bring up good conversations, whatever. Let me. So, you did choose two subjects that I like to think that I know a lot of.
Sure.
But so you are kind of like walking into lines bin here. So let's see. So I think let's go over to this one first. Okay, just again, I want to make sure that the audience kind of knows this. But if you look at the ISA 95 chart, I'm heavy into the batching and MES and the automation. We don't really get to so much into the field stuff as far as supplying and that kind of stuff. So we're mostly hardware. And you can see like right here, like throughout the years, like we were heavy in Iconics before we started the company. And then it just, as soon as we found, SQL Bridge inside of Ignition, we're done. We were convinced and over. I actually think if I wanted to make an argument, which one had a better graphics system, I know that I'm a big fan of Ignition, but I think Iconics was better graphics, especially on 64, not a 32. But anyway, just a lot more functionality, that kind of stuff, whatever. But anyway, yeah, Ignition for the rest of the time. But I just want to clarify, it's like, that's where I'm coming from. So anyway, so your Mark, you kind of like here's a hypothetical plant, whatever the case is. Let's go through it. It's a sure. This is a paper company. But let's see. You need to swap out the plant that has a set of processes and flows from different machines. Okay.
But I suppose I'm working with a company here, and I won't not giving anything away, but make corrugated paper products. Things you see them. So they have a process where first you have to make the corrugated paper, then you have to cut out the shapes, then you have to make the boxes, and that there'll technically be a couple of steps. But the idea that I was saying was that each step flows on from the other. So you have this sort of work in progress idea. Rather than, some plants, raw materials come in, goes to a workstation, and a finished product comes out, which is a very different use case. So I kind of took that as my inspiration, the job I was working on, and said, okay, let's say you had two corrugators in the plant. One's high speed, one's low speed, but it can do printing on it. So, not all POs can go to the same ones. There's two die cutters, they can take them from any line. And then there's 3 sets of finishing machines. 5 machines in each set. One doesn't use glue, one uses glue, and one adds a clear window. So you can see your sandwich or whatever's inside it. And I said, the next few notes I was making was so that, I don't want to be talking about their digital strategy and these things, because let's assume they've done all that and they've looked themselves and, they're not very advanced, right. That you have that, which is a common problem. You have a company, I think, that has a nice ERP maybe. In this case we didn't, but you might have a nice ERP because it's corporate, and then you have PLCs and HMIs, and there's nothing happening in between. And
this statement right here was
yeah. That happened. This just happened to me. Yeah. I'll keep my anger level down. We can get access to the PLCs. Some of them we can, and we couldn't get access to all of them in this particular project. We did have, and we didn't have to make this, so we took a shortcut here. Someone had put in where they were taking a pulse basically from every machine to give them a count, which was going into a Bosch Rexroth system. So we could over Modbus get pulses, which is never a good idea. But we were counting pulses over Modbus, and as opposed to if you can get into the PLC, it's a different game. That's a different project. But I think if you go in to do digital transformation on a company, where the machines are old, even if you can get access to some PLCs, you'll have some machines that mightn't have a PLC. There is actually with this, they have one or two machines that have no PLC. They're very old. So it was just to throw out a little thing. What do we do? How do we approach it? Not to make it too easy. And then this was the thing. So at the moment, waste isn't getting recorded, but paper goes into bins, and they know how much waste goes out in total, but they've no idea where it comes from.
Okay. Yep.
Maybe you'll come up with a better solution than we just put in.
Well, I don't know.
Not too much better for these guys.
Yeah. But all of us would like to work with a budget that's, unlimited, but that's not the reality. And sometimes it takes, I've had a client spend 7 years and 5 different quotes. And then finally they got approved. So, that's the reality of the work, of some of these budgets. So anyway, I'll go real quickly through all this. So, sure. What's the right thing to do? What should be done in the future? So if you wanted to separate those in the first thing that I would do is obviously a meeting with the supervisors, operators, maintenance, try to understand, the machine issues, that kind of stuff. Then I would build on the education, right? So, build on top of the customer's understanding, because sometimes they don't know what OEE is, and sometimes they've got an understanding of it. So, once you establish that, it'd be nice if you could review previous MES projects with them, what's worked in the past and what's failed. Because if they have prior MES experience like OEE, there's a very good chance that they know which ones have not worked, So I want to know what has worked in the past, where they're coming from. So review the pros and cons and some of the budgetary numbers, because a lot of times the customer doesn't, especially the ones that haven't worked on an MES project, they don't know which way, or to right or left, which way costs more and which way costs less. So the problem with starting some of these projects is the first thing that I want to do is I want to know and understand the environment. So analyzing all the discontinued or obsolete hardware, because if it's already obsolete, I don't necessarily want to put a lot of time and effort into it. We want to start making a list of things that need to be migrated over. A lot of times we'll stop by a plant and, already right off the bat, they're already having networking issues. So when I start seeing any plant that's got over 100 devices, a lot of times what I see is that there's a lot of unmanaged switches, and everything is communicating with everything. And then we've finally gotten to a point where as soon as they plug in a new device or new machine, everything starts, the network.
I've lost Brent.
Yeah.
Don't know if I've lost everyone.
Oh. You can steer it. Okay. Did I lose you?
Yeah.
Did I freeze?
You've okay. Here in a minute. Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So as far as like as soon as we see more than 100 devices, yeah, we'd like to do a network analysis to see where we can put some managed switches to reduce some of the traffic noise. That, and we get all the PLCs connected, we get remote access, and then we start working on all the PLC, HMI, and the SCADA control software. And they may have a development area or a maintenance area where they do some of these changes. And then we start implementing revision control. So after all of that, then we can
I
pick
ask a
one or
question
several
there?
machines to work on. Uh, yeah, before it. Yeah,
So just, I mean,
because this
so
is a
if we're
lot,
looking at
right?
the reviewing, yeah, well, the reviewing stuff, and I think it might scare people, and just in case there's some plant manager CEOs listening to us, you know, that analysis, for 20, 30 machines, it might be, it should be less than half a day. A machine is kind of what I'm thinking. It doesn't need to be a deep dive. You can get an awful lot. It's a week or two, depending on the site to me. But what I was going to ask was, do you often find that, if a customer has an engineering station and has the software for all of their PLCs and
Oh
all of
yeah,
their SCADA, you're in situation A. It's brilliant. Give me your own access to that PLC, and we're away. We can do everything. What I'm finding, and that would have been my, I mean, I was working for Pepsi. If someone looks at my LinkedIn, they'll know that. Yeah, we everything's well done. We have it all. It's great. Other customers, small customers, they don't have that. They got their machines from a machine builder, and they don't have access to the code. They may not have, so they certainly can't change anything on the program. They may be able to read all the data, but that's not even a given. And then sometimes they can get an obscene quote to give them a small bit of data, and that's the only way I've seen that, and I'm kind of going, it's sickening. It is almost abuse, the prices that I've seen. You're kind of going, especially when it's on 10 machines that are the same. Guys. But I suppose my question was, what's the mix? How often do you see it? Because yeah, the easy one where you've got all the access, road access, were great. It's where we don't. How do we start to do this? Have you, you know, um, what do you do when you have a couple of machines that don't? Because the machine builders just, um, you know, I've had places. I've had one project where nobody could get in contact with the company that programmed the PLC, because we don't know what if the guy. It was a one guy, and the website was a couple of years old. No answer from the phone. No answer from email. What do we do then? How is that a situation? Any clever ideas? You know, especially I think if it's a machine. Now, okay, where you can't communicate with a machine. And you're trying to do this digital transformation.
right. And so then it goes into the
Any
budget.
clever ideas?
Yeah. So we have
Yeah.
I have been faced up with these problems. And so one was these injection molding machines had their own proprietary solution already for OE, right? And we were going to go
Okay.
use Ignition on top of that. Now, did they give us access to a port that had some data in it? And the answer was yes. Of course, we have to take that and do our best we can. We didn't have all access to all the data, but we had some, and so we were just going to go off
Yeah.
that. Now, the other one was they bought a machine from China that was running on Siemens, and so and then the company just like it seemed like they built one, and then they just vanished. So it's just like that was it. There's no board or nothing like that. We couldn't find them, and nobody. So in a case of like that, and again, we would have to do our best, but then at some point, we would have to look at migration, and because that machine from China, it was not supportable. I mean, you couldn't support it. So if anything broke,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole machine's gone. So that this is and then there was on top of that there was also some Wago PLCs out there, and yes, I'm with you. They had them locked out. You couldn't get the data. Took a lot of convincing to even talk to somebody on the phone, and even that they were like, we don't let anybody touch it, and we've got this proprietary software over here on the side we can sell you and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I'm with you on that. Yeah, those are going to be certain serious issues, but I'm under the assumption that if a plant is producing millions of dollars a year, they've got to own it. They've got to own everything they put into the plant. And so if you find something that is not, you can't manhandle it, you can't get data out of it, you can't make improvements on it, then remove it. So I know that sounds like an unfeasible answer, but you know,
Yeah. And
yeah,
it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes. But I was asked recently, what's the one advice you'd give someone on digital transformation? What could we do? And I said, write into all of your machinery specifications.
right,
You will have to give us, yes, ideally we can access the PLC. We can, give it we full access to the PLC. We'll own the software. Now, not every company can demand that, but you can demand we want access to all key data. Okay, what's key data? You can go further and start to write it out. But as I always say, like, you give me a count, I can do 50% of the stuff. You give me count and a status. Yeah, we can do an awful lot with those two data points.
right,
Yeah, give me alarms, give me the you've got that huge curve,
right,
where you get that first 5-10 data points. You don't need all 5,000. Great if you have it,
right.
but as I said, that's the one bit of advice that if would really help your digital transformation journey is, well, get that line into your specs 5 years ago. As like someone said, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. So,
Right.
um,
So here, let's dive into that. So what I decided to do is make a less depth solution and a more depth solution. So
okay,
I'm gonna show you these here in a second. But so the less depth is what I would call it. So no PLC access, no ERP, banner engineering solution is what I would probably prefer. And I'll touch on that in a second. And then, only a month timeline, and then probably closer towards the 3,000 each machine. And so I'll go into the more depth here in a second, but just so we're on the same page, I built this graph, and I'm sure some people will have some arguments with it, but let's go through the three different categories here. So one is a very basic, right? So we're talking about
yes,
manual reason codes, which I would fight anybody on, but you got only about a 10% automatic data, right? So it's only collecting, start, stop. Maybe you can get parts coming in or parts coming out. So lots of subjective human intervention, right? So maybe this is a optional cloud. It definitely is one of those things where it's like, where I see this most is a digital thread type architecture. It's like grab some of the basic stuff, throw that up in the cloud. This is where you see a lot of the OEE type of solutions. So you're getting a lot more data. You're actually plugging into the PLC. You do get alarm analysis. You may have scheduling. You may have integration with ERP. And then this is definitely something that they want you on a subscription model, that kind of stuff, whatever. It's only until you get here where you start getting where it's almost all automatic data. And then you'll get root fault analysis, and I'll go into that. You do get the scheduling and the ERP, and then obviously you could connect these types of standard interface machines into an ecosystem. So, but go ahead.
So, like, I agree, and I love this.
Yeah.
I would say I've just built a system where it's 10% automatic, manual reason codes, integrated into the ERP, using a UNS structure, and they're going to add in scheduling soon.
Oh, wow.
Like, I tend to use a UNS structure for everything at the moment, even maybe where I shouldn't. There was one project that I'm doing, and people going, but why are you putting it into a broker? You could just insert it into the database. I went, because that's where my head's at, and it helps keep it structured, and it does. And a bit I'm going, well, in the future, I might be pulling that information from another source, and I want to be able to seamlessly change. And I agree with you that manual reason codes are terrible. But I'd also say, anything someone says before but doesn't matter. It is so much better than not having them.
And maybe this is where we'll disagree. But then that's fine too.
But one caveat on it: have only a couple options.
Yeah. You can't have 130 reason codes. Yeah. You got to have like 7, right?
Yeah, and I would agree. And I would agree. I mean, just maybe I'll take that back a bit and be less dogmatic because, in some of the places, it was decided let's just classify it as process waste or startup waste, and we could do that automatically. And it's better than trying to capture the reasons.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll dial it back a bit, but I still think, I suppose if I can't get automatic reason codes, that's not a reason to stop.
I think
Let me put it that way.
Yeah, here's where I would agree with you. If you had a staff that was financially, incentivized to do it, because I can tell you on some of the plants that I visit, none of these. There's a mass. Let's just be honest. A massive amounts of their employees are cycled through. They get the gig. The plant knows the gig. They try to pay them as least as possible. These are not high paid individuals. There is absolutely no incentive for any operator to type anything worth of any value into that reason code, manual reason code. So in the past, I have felt not only is the operator not incentivized, but also, it's a subjective, right? So maintenance and operations could obviously argue on what the reason was, and they don't want to be at blame and at fault. So I just think that it's like you wouldn't get advice, troubleshooting car advice for fixing your truck off of a 12-year-old. So I just that's my argument, that it's so bad that it's going to waste your time.
I was lucky on the last project. There was a couple hundred reason codes, and we're working with really a top class, the global waste guy, and he was like, no, these are root causes. You want the operator to say, when they put in they put in a fault code, it is, this is what I saw. No more analysis than that. And often people want analysis. And to come back to your car, it's, this light was on. That's as much as you're saying. It's not, oh, the engine was overheating. No, the engine overheating light was on. But I hear exactly where you're coming from. And again, I may be reading too much. Maybe it's a difference with the job security in Europe and the hiring, that there'll be less cycling of employees. No, there still is in a plant, but there may tend to be more, so you get a different experience. But I don't disagree with you that it's junk. I don't. But
go ahead.
Yeah, I think rather than saying it's junk, I'd be saying to someone, look, if you don't have automatic reason codes and you find yourself in this position, simplify it as much as you can.
Right.
Maybe you can even simplify it to automatic, and get some data automatically is better than trying to have too many. If you have 3 drag-ins to go, whatever, it'll be whatever's in the top left corner will be bang, bang, bang.
Right. Yeah. I guess my argument...
But I really like that graph before. I really, really do. It's a great way of doing it.
Well, it is funny that you were able to do. You were able to just screw it all up. You've got,
but I mean,
mostly. Yeah. But and you got a ERP, Chris. So you've thrown me off here. But I'll have to go.
But but then, I mean, we were looking at doing integration at one point through the ERP would go a CSV file, and we'd read that CSV file from Node-RED, and that would parse the data and publish it into our UNS. It's not like where you have a plugin or a BAPI, and you're still relying on getting the data in a very old school way.
Right.
I tend to think that way. I kind of go, you get the data in whatever way you can, and then once it's in and it's in the central, you've got a unified namespace. Everything else from there can use the data well. Just get it in.
Right.
Whatever we've got to do.
Right. So to go back to it, and I'll stream through it. So it's just we have plenty of time to talk.
Yeah.
But so for this would be my less depth solution if it was a plant that had lots of cycling of employees, and then I didn't want to trust the manual entry reason codes. And so my
Sure.
solution on definitely on machines that didn't have any kind of PLC is I'd be only receiving, parts in, parts out, stopped running and idle. I mean, again, if it stopped for some odd reason, I would have to investigate a lot more. I don't have that type of data with what the reason was. There's, what I would do is I would go around each machine. I would put the typical banner light tower. I would wire this up for running, stopped, and idle in the parts. And then what I would do is I would use their gateway, and I would either go into Banner's cloud if I didn't have a current SCADA system, or I would pump this via Modbus into a SCADA system and go from there. So we wanted to talk about price. You'd have to do a couple of colors, whatever, green, amber, and red there. But that's generally what I would. We talked about wanting a solution that would be my approach to it. I know we talked about in the last podcast, using the Raspberry Pi, but this is more. I would feel more comfortable with more of an industrial solution, and this would be my path.
I mean,
so anyway, I don't know.
I love Raspberry Pis. I have two Velcroed under my desk, and another one sitting on top of it. But like for this sort of solution, I'd be like, would we not just put in a Siemens S7 1200? It's about €500 here, and I can expand it in the future to take over the whole machine if you need to. I like them. I've done a lot with them. I do like them. But there's a load of other solutions you can put in. Especially if you want to put in something that's a bit more modern.
Right.
With something that has a Linux integrated, and you can put in your stuff down there. I'm not a fan of the cloud, and that's just me being, but I get at this sort of price point, you do it as a subscription, it makes sense. But then, and it depends on
right.
Can they are you going to stop them running if they lose their connection to the cloud? And it depends on the company. Then you're going, well, how you can have a company that haven't invested, but going, guys, you're making millions here. We can do this, or we can buy a few servers and put them in, and it's only going to cost, 10,000 for the hardware, and you've got a solution, and you're making a profit of 500 million a year anyway. Come on.
Right. Well, here's what I would say about using the cloud. What if all of a sudden you were a plant and you don't have, all that much money and that kind of stuff, and you wanted to solve some problems? Again, you're not going to get any kind of depth, but you want to learn something from it. I'm not against somebody starting a plant, starting with this, throwing a few grand at it, and then learning from it. And then before they jump into the 500,000 or whatever the case is, or something a lot more advanced. So, you could make a pretty good argument that you need to start at some point and learn from it. So anyway.
Yeah. I had a conversation, or maybe a realization. You can weigh in on this. Myself and a client, we were chatting late one night, and we were kind of finishing the project, and it had gone well. It was there, typical pilot, couple of machines, and we were going, we should actually have just done one machine, build it in Node-RED with a dashboard, Grafana front end. We'd have done it in a month and a half. We'd have spent nothing on hardware, but we'd have learned all the problems rather than spending 500,000. And it's like, and for that first bit you do, don't worry about technical debt. You've got to throw it out. It's a pure learning.
I would want a signature on that. It's going to be thrown away. It doesn't scale.
Yeah. Well, look, it might scale, and you might say, look, let's build it in Ignition and see does it work, and if it's working, we'll turn on the license. Maybe that's another way to do it. Maybe you don't have to completely throw it out, but that you're saying, I think And it's a tough thing to sometimes swing at a corporate gig to say, give me 2 months of a programmer who's going to work on this pretty much flat out, and I'm not promising you any return.
Right.
But when you go on to spend that $500,000 on your 10 machines, you're going to save 10 to 20% because you're going to know the problems. You're going to know,
right?
Yeah, integrating into the ERP is impossible, and this is how we got around it. And it's the send. I mean, put 2 interns on it, and they'll solve every problem in the world, in ways that no one ever imagined possible.
I don't know. 2 interns, though. I don't know.
You have to guide them in a bit, but
yeah.
Two third year engineering college students. Give them a bit of give them something to do. Give them a target. Give them a little bit of rope and a little bit of guidance. And
that's true.
We'll sit down and all 3 of us are going to come up with a solution that's going to be kind of the same. We might use a different technology. We're going to do it, but you'll use your Banner Gateway. I'll have a Siemens S7 1200. Someone puts in a Raspberry Pi,
and that's not a, and if you learn from it, here's probably the weirdest thing about definitely MES is the hardest product that we sell to customers, and you'll find that they troubleshoot differently. So how do you can't standardize on anything when building an MES solutions, right? So you need different dashboards, they just people troubleshoot differently. So it's very fascinating to see that you might need to make a custom solution for every single customer based on the skill set that they've got at that plant. All right, well, let me go into the other solution. So, all right, so more in depth, right? So let's just say if we've got an unlimited kind of budget and we're going to go all right. So PLC access, and this is where we're going to install two drivers in here. One's are what we would call an OE driver. The other one is a root fault driver, and we'll go into that in a second here. We are already going to do ERP integration into Ignition. Ignition is going to have it's going to be the OE engine. Scales are integrated into the PLC. Little longer, right? So 2 to 4 months because we've got server, learn from the machine, that kind of stuff, whatever. So you're talking about a base. You need servers, you need hardware, virtual machines, you need access. So all of that is kind of like you need a foundation per se. And then we're talking about $6,000. And this is like average, just a typical standard machine that you can somewhat modern code that you can learn from. So you're essentially, I'm putting a programmer to know and take ownership of that machine, to know that process. So he's visiting the plant floor, he's visiting the operator who uses it, he's visiting the maintenance guy that knows. So when he does dive and he does go into the logic, when he does install this OE driver, he understands it and how it works. And this OE driver is how we, is our interface that we use to connect to the OE engine. So anyway, I'll go really quick into it. So, we're talking about an Ignition with SQL. We can plug into whatever PLCs we are, but we're installing, in this case of an Allen Bradley, it would be AOIs. We're installing 2 of them into the into the logic here. You've got OE visual tools that will depend on.
So just to back up there, so I suppose, but your strategy here is you're going to put in a block of code that's going to map to Ignition, and you've got that pre-plugged, and then the hard bit, the $6,000, is figuring out which existing tag of the PLC maps across. Yeah. Well, I've broken my heart doing that job.
It's messy, right? It's and every single one of these is a unique snowflake, right? So everybody writes it different. The nomenclature. I mean, we talked about this. Is like with Johnny, is the running bit doesn't necessarily mean it's running. It might be just the power's on. to the machine.
Yeah.
And so you physically have to go into the code and then find the producing bit, you know. I mean,
And
here's
I
go ahead.
no, go on.
Here's where I would say the reason why you need to do this. Let's I'm gonna shorten this up here. So your first level is just the OE. That's easy to get. It's not a problem, whatever case is. Your second thing is that in this is part of the OE driver, and that is you're going to get machine states, right? So this is going to be embedded into the code. But your third thing that we, well, you know, maybe others that provide this as well, but what we do like to do is like to give root faults, and I'll go into this is not alarms but root faults, and here's where I guess this is the difference between the reason why we embed the code. And the reason is that when you do open machine or a machine does stop, a lot of times what happens is the machine will alarm, and there's usually a cascading set of alarms. And usually it's so fast acting that if you had like a cloud solution or whatever case is, and it was looking at alarms, they don't know which alarm was the actual root fault. It's just all you're going to report is all the alarms that happen. So what you do is you actually write in the code, you know, say this is, and I apologize, I've been staring at this for a while, but follow me here for a second. The machine faults, right? It goes high. So the root fault goes high. This is a subset of the machine faults. So say the door opens, machine, you know, or a motor overfaults, whatever the case is. So that root fault goes high. As soon as it drops down and it gets reset, that root fault stays active, and then only it only goes down and as soon as you become productive again. So what I'm getting at is that this root fault, pinpointing exactly which alarm was the fault of it, and blaming that is what will provide you a better report. So if this is the report that you're giving the maintenance guy, I would want this report. This report's probably worthless. So that's why. And it, by the way, this happens so fast that there's no way that you're going to do this over a network. So the only way you can do this is embedded into the code of the PLC. The PLC is going to have a PLC cycle that's going to be fast enough to tell you which alarm was it that activated first. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, it's.
Okay.
I think OT engineers of a certain hue will, you know, recognize when they've had their historian open, zoomed into the millisecond,
Yeah.
and they're looking at a bunch of different alarm bits to see, well, which one went high first.
Right.
And then you're kind of going, and does that make sense based on the temperature, or whatever? But if you go back, what I was gonna say was, you know, where that idea where you have of having the communications between your OE engine or your SCADA or your ignition to your PLC being constant for every single machine. I've seen people try and do it the other way, where, you know, you put in all the raw data and then you try to make sense of that raw data inside your SCADA or, you know, somewhere, and there's just too much.
Right.
There's that, you know, and even from a not quite a commercial, but from a workflow point of view, that can be somewhere where you can say, look, here's the mapping, and you can say to the customer, you've got some maintenance engineers here who know the code.
Right.
We're going to need them to do the mapping. Because to learn the whole thing, you know, someone learns the code, you've got someone looking at a code for 6 weeks, they know the code inside out at the end of 6 weeks, and then they go away to the next job.
Yeah. There's no way, and I wonder if I've got it here. But I'm with you, and I'm glad that you actually have some experience. But trying to build an OE driver by just pulling it out of the PLC and just throwing it up in the cloud, I can never see that it works. I can only see reports before you find out that that's not telling the truth. And again, at that point, you've probably wasted a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, if you know what you're getting and you know, well, I'm getting something that's quick,
Yeah.
easy, and gives me some information that's somewhat limited, great. But I think people think they're getting something that can tell them everything, and it's the same as the guy who spent $1 million putting in the own system in the plant, and you're going, and that's the problem. People, people don't tell them, um, you know, and again, look, this is me being too egalitarian, perhaps, and that there's a place for everything, and that every product has a place, um, and that some information is better than no information.
Right.
But if people are open and people are saying, yeah, look, it's 1,000 for the hardware and 500 quid a month, and you're going to get these dashboards, and we've made a whole load of assumptions, but it'll get you from A to B to reduce your waste, and then to get from B to C and C to D, C to E, you're going to have to put in something else. But
Yeah, I mean, that raises a really good question. I don't know, or I guess
yeah,
my fear would be is that they see the cheap solution and want to scale that solution, and then they get really upset that they've spent a lot of time and effort into it, and then it only goes 70%.
yeah,
I guess as long as they are fully aware of it and they signed off on it. But no, back to your point. This was a slide that I built a long time ago, and that is that this is what PLC tags look like. And then I'm with you. There's no assuming that you can take PLC tags and their logic behind them and clean it all up is I don't see how this scales out. I don't know how a lot of these guys have been able to sell products or solutions this way.
sure.
Anyway. So
Yeah.
let me dive into it. Let's go through here. So you're talking about like a typical filler, case packer. You've got the drivers. You've also got a machine, a touchscreen, that a line PLC that you're configuring and setting up the line through. So that way it can, maybe you've got an SAP or ERP system that prints out a work order. They scan it. It gets the user. It gets the parameters. Everything gets all set up here. You can trend it, you can table it, that kind of stuff. This is for the operator down below. And then you can obviously organize this, if this could be a connection edge if it needed to be, but chances are it's probably going to be a SCADA system. And then you can organize it into a UNS or just a structure and then go from to ignition to reports. So that's how we talked about, how I would do it.
I mean,
That's
it is. The one thing I'd say, and this
more
is, I think,
in-depth.
the realization that I mentioned earlier, and again, it's one of these things that to sell it can be more difficult, but the less step solution, there could be value by doing the less step solution on one machine, spending a small amount of money, figuring out the problems, figuring out the process. Having a conversation today, how often do you do a project, you're testing it, and the integrators are saying, oh, I thought the process that you did this when you went, and it's like, no. Or if you're the integrator, you're going, you never told me that you do your waste that way. You never told me this is a special case when this happens. And then, so this was a question about, the value of value stream mapping, and it's like, draw it out. I mean, I think we all do a bit of value stream mapping in any project, and you sketch it out and you draw it and you say, yeah, this makes sense. But, like, again, I'm a big believer in the concept of having drawings and having stuff on paper, even logic drawings, which are a bit old. No one expects a piper to be able to come into a plant and figure out how this place works without a P&ID drawing. And yet, you're as an integrator, you come in and there's a PLC and no one knows how it works, and they expect, well, I assume you can just look at it and you're going, saying, like, guys, no, it's like I can speak French and there's a book in French. That doesn't mean I know what's in the book. It means I can find out, but it's gonna take me a while. And if you're gonna quiz me on it, which you're gonna do for the integration, I'm gonna have to study it, and it's gonna take time. Um, so yeah, big fan of drawings and getting that process and that understanding and that 3K project which you mentioned. There's probably oh, 200-300 man hours from the customer to get the information because they don't have it. And
No. Yeah, can you so the question would be is can you ever walk into a plant that has all of their processes all on AutoCAD or some kind of layout, whatever the case is, and they've got descriptions on each and every single process that they've got.
Yeah.
If that was the case, man, I mean, our cost would be incredibly cheap, but
and
pouring that out of that,
I mean,
all of their thoughts onto a piece of paper
I've worked in places. So I was working in a refinery in California, and we were able to go through the CAD drawings and find a drawing from, I think it was 1904, and it had the whale oil station on it. There's panels that aren't, we had panels, we didn't have drawings that were put in 10 years earlier, let alone the changes that were made to them. And I think a lot of this is kind of, so it's like, I've had to explain to people, yeah, it's cheaper to try and just get a new panel than pay me to give you a drawing of that panel because it'll just take me so long to figure out what's happening and to get it. And people look at you like and I'm going, yeah, and I'll give you a drawing of a new panel on top of it. And they're looking at you and you're going, yeah, because it's a mess. It's untangling the net. It takes a lot longer than building a new net. But yeah, no, I mean,
and we can't take a picture of that and just send it to GPT.
I had one project
and just
a few years ago, and we were changing out an Allenbrad, an old ABB PLC, and we had a PDF of the code which was instruction language, as in load, register, add, register, not structured text language. I was there hoping I'd find it on an old USB, and I'd love to give it to ChatGPT and say, can you write a functional specification based on what this code is and tell me what it does? I mean, we did a load, and I can remember my junior engineer, she was great. She did a load of reverse engineering of it. And then a load of it we just ignored, and we said, yeah, we just build a new. I mean, I wrote a homogenizer PLC program to drive the homogenizer based on what that process guy told me sitting down next to me. Okay, yeah, we'll do it. We'll ramp up this point. This, there's 10 controls, rather than trying to understand what was in the old one. You're kind of looking back going, right, I mean, worked well in the end, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to know what the best approach is sometimes. But I do find, I suppose, maybe with the experience talking, throwing stuff out can often save you. Have a good think about it.
I have mixed debates about this one. I had it's really unfortunate, but I gained access to a plant because somebody had committed suicide, and oftentimes I never got to the ability to ask him why he did what he did. So a lot of times what would happen is I was like, oh, he wrote it too confusing and too complex. I can simplify it, and of course I would swap his code out for something else, and of course it would break it. I'm like, okay, maybe there was a reason why you did it this way. Yeah, that's a good one. But my business partner just yesterday just mentioned this. I would rather get from the customer how you want it versus what it's been done 20 years ago, or however it was programmed 20 years ago, because that's been so long that they were
Yeah,
like, oh, it shouldn't have been working that way anyway. It's been broken, or that they've always been wanting
yes,
it done a different way. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
this the
So,
discussion needs to happen
and I
again.
think
Uh,
actually, and I only
do we
said it
want it that
to a
way again?
customer who
Yeah.
was talking to their plant manager who had asked for something that he had at another plant, and I said, hang on, go back and ask what's the problem he wants solved, and come up with the best way we can do it, rather than trying to shoehorn in something that worked very well from another piece of software that that's not going to work, and it's never going to be what they want. You know, so I think that's a good idea. And it's a good point to always kind of, do we need this? So
Mark, but have you ever worked with a programmer who goes, no, I don't even want to look at it.
no.
I want my signature inside that PLC, and so therefore I'm gonna I'm ripping it out
No,
anyway.
it was,
I mean, because there's a lot of because I would say there's a lot of programmers who don't want to invest a lot of time and effort into reversing something.
Yeah.
They would rather just swap it out. So it's like, okay, well, it's fresh in my mind, and this is, it's organized the way my mind works. And if I'm going to take
Yeah,
ownership of it,
yes,
might
and
as well be it
but again,
my
that
way.
depends
So
on
it's a language that I can understand.
on the case.
Anyway.
There's sometimes when I'd say that, but one would be like, if it's emotion, I'm going to stay away from it. That's also synchronized. That's there. The dairy I mentioned earlier, the company I was working for kind of took over, and I mean, there must be what 20, 30 PLCs, S7300s, S7400s, pretty, beefy units, and different iterations that have been programmed by different people. And we were adding more in then, and so the new stuff we'll add in our own way, but you'd never untangle it, and you'd never have got you'd never have been able to take that plant down for long enough to reprogram everything. So it's really horses for courses. If you can do it, great, but a lot of the time,
right,
you can't. I don't care.
Mark, what's your preference
codices,
on
but other than that,
brands on the PLCs? Have you
things you
like, things you don't?
I don't like codices.
Allen Bradley, Siemens, PLC Next.
I've
never done codices. Tell me,
I haven't done enough of it.
Why don't you like codices?
If you wanted to work as a
I've never used it, so
PLC programmer in Ireland,
okay,
I'd say 50% of the market is Siemens and 49% is Allen Bradley. If you said to me, well, no, sorry, that's not. Let me be a bit more nuanced. But if you at the machine level, there'll be more. There'll be Omrons, Mitsubishis at the machine level, some other things. But if in a process plant, in particular, unless something is old and is ABB, if I would say, if we're looking at in a process PLC put in the last 20 years, more than 90% of them will be Siemens and Allen Bradley. And if it's an American parent company, it's Allen Bradley. So when I worked for Pepsi, all Allen Bradley.
Okay.
If it's kind of more native or a European company, it'll tend to be Siemens. I mean, Siemens. I have never seen one in the wild.
What about Micon?
I've never walked into a plant and seen one. I've had plants where there's been ABB PLCs, certainly, sitting, and they sit and they're doing what they're doing, and no one's going at them, and they'll stay there till they break. I think. Yes, you'd see some Mitsubishi. I would say
Wago
Mitsubishi
and
would
Mitsubishi.
be probably third. waggle a bit. But again, it'll tend to be smaller companies, smaller like um, you know, um, tends not to be um, so I think machines that come in, it can be different. And you'll get this, and I've had machines, and there's been Fujitsu and all sorts of things, but that's at the machine level where, yeah, that's sitting there and no one's ever going to go at it. Um, you know, I've had one job that was a Wago with Codesys. And that was the one where the guy had got missing.
Do you?
And we had to
Okay.
redo the code and get it working again. And that was why I came in. But what I found, it was all this sort of unnecessary loading of files, loading of licenses, finding the right library. I'm kind of going, no, I want it to be there. I want to, and I went from Code. I had to go from Codesys 2 to Codesys 3. And the libraries that we used to program don't exist anymore. And I was like, going, all right, okay, thanks, guys. Or that library on version 2 isn't in version 3. So I had to use a different Modbus library. Now, as it turned out, I was able to just re-download the code and get everything working and go online and do a little bit of tweaking. It was okay in the end. But I was like going, it just felt unnecessary and it wasn't slick. Now, yes, I've done a fair bit of step 7, but most of my Siemens program in the end was with TIA, and that's the right way to have a programming environment. Um, like compared to Alan Bradley, I go to TLA,
Oh wow.
I go
Okay.
to my TIA portal, and I have a single point where I'm through my PLC and my HMI. They're connected as a project. My WinCC is connected in that project as well. If it's is it the smaller and the larger one, the WinCC that isn't, they rebranded. Was it PassX or one of those as WinCC? But it's all in the one environment. If I want to do that with Alan Bradley, it's different software that doesn't even have the same look and feel, and you're kind of going, guys, aren't you supposed to be? I mean, the guy, I think everybody has an engineering guru they worked for, that sort of shapes them, and I certainly did. Jar may be listening to this, and a shout out to him if he is. But as he said, like, I remember him going, look, no, every page in a document we're doing needs to look the same. It's a professional company, the formatting, the layout. This is simple stuff. And you're kind of going, guys, why doesn't your software look the same? I don't get it. So that's kind of why I'd say Siemens over Alan Bradley. But if a customer again was asking me, there's nothing Siemens can do that Alan Bradley can't do for 99% of it. Yeah, in some motion, I think Siemens is better. I've never had to test that out. Siemens has MQTT modules that Alan Bradley doesn't have. Little stuff like that, but like Siemens, the S7-1200 has a fabulous module that I used to use for sending text messages, where you put the SIM card into the module, and it was for sending alarms out from a wind farm. Where so yeah, there's edge cases where one can do something that you can't. But for 90% of the place I'm going there, like I'd love to get a groove. I don't think we can get them over. I don't know if it's rated to be put in the EU. There is I've looked into it a little bit, and there's a distributor in the UK, but they don't seem to sell the PLCs. They seem to sell other stuff. So yeah, I mean, but then and I'd always be of the opinion, if the standard, and by that I mean, there's a famous saying, no one ever got fired for buying Big Blue. So if we were IT guys back in the 80s and we had to buy a system and we went IBM, no one's ever going to say we made the wrong choice. If Siemens is going to be if Siemens is going to do everything it is, and it's got a great price point, and I can get a small S7-1200 for €170, and it does what I need it to do, why would I go try and save 50 to go with something that isn't as industrial tested, that isn't, so the same name. People have asked me the same question about brokers, and I've gone, well, look, if you want to have a professional, proper MQTC broker, you have two choices to pay for. And then, it's one of them. I wouldn't, if you have a small edge case and you're running Mosquito and you're doing a little bit here, fine. If you're hanging your entire system off it, you want someone you can phone at the other end of the line. And if you're in Europe, why wouldn't you go with the car company that's based in Germany? Especially if you're in mainland Europe. It doesn't become about the technology, because both of them are good enough to do everything you need to do in 99% of the cases. You'll only find out it can't do it 2 years down the road. You don't know that. You don't know that someone's going to ask you to do that. No. I think sometimes you listen to people talking about capabilities, and it's a bit like people arguing over, well, this car can go at 250 miles an hour and this one can go at 270. And going, yeah, but the speed limit's 70, guys. What does it really matter to me? No, I'm not a car guy, but so I think sometimes you there's these conversations that go on in our space, and you're going, guys, it doesn't actually matter for most customers. Get it in, get the value, and move on to the next thing that adds the value. And don't worry, can I handle 2 billion data points or 3 billion data points? You're never going to get more than 1 million, guys.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, actually,
Yes,
this is a good kind of
I mean,
question. Do you
there's
see DCS
a lot of
systems
pharma.
anymore?
I mean, Cork, where I am, there's 5 minutes down the road, you have 2 or 3 large Pfizer plants. GSK are there. Going the other direction, there's MSD, Eli Lilly. A lot of the farmers do the kind of GEDC, the GEDCS. Delta V. There's a lot of Delta V. There's an integrator here which started 25 years ago in Cork, had 1,000 odd guys working for them globally, and got bought out by TCS recently. Now, to put in context, Cork is a city of 250,000 people. So that's a big integrator. As I said, you go down the road, you've got the Pfizer plant that makes the world's Lipitor. You've got the Pfizer plant that creates the world's Viagra, next to each other. So yeah, Cork isn't always a representative place when you look at manufacturing and pharmaceutical. And there's a lot of companies, like that. There's a lot of stuff shipped out. So yeah, there is a good bit of DCS. There'll be Foxborough as well and Honeywell. But I mean, apart from Delta V, I'd say there's probably 2 or 3 installations in the country with them, and that's enough for them to keep a presence. I don't see anyone putting in. I don't see anyone putting in a new DCS unless they're building it on others, but definitely a lot of Delta V. If anyone's a Delta V integrator and wants to come to Cork, there is job. I see one every second week. There's someone looking for Delta V programmers. There always seem to be. And I've no experience in DCS. I've never done anything with them myself, but there's a fair bit around.
I'm kind of curious on as far as like price, right? So I have a customer that does do Delta V type stuff, but they were shocked and alarmed about how cheap they could actually do it with Ignition and Allen Bradley. So it was just like they were held hostage. They've got what I would define as a mafia that renegotiates contracts with them every year, and then they look at us going,
Yeah,
you guys aren't holding a gun to our heads. And I'm like, this is the normal world. So
yeah,
I don't play it out. I don't know why the stronghold on DCS. So that's
y-
maybe it just it became a standard in the very
yeah,
get go, and of course they'll just continue on that. But any new
yeah.
plan,
I think in the large
I'm
batch
I'd be
validated plants,
I don't know
there's
what
a
if
case
there's any
there.
reason for it. That's
I'd
all.
be I'm the wrong person to make it. I've seen it made. But even in the newer sort of pharmaceutical, um,
Sure.
and newer plants, the smaller players and smaller dose, and that it tends to be more PLC based. You know, it really, to me, it's when you had a sort of monolithic plant and you had a huge process and you would like one process in one plant, it makes sense. I mean, where I really came in contact with it was in a bauxite refinery I was working in. And they had one and it controlled the whole system, pretty much. And but like that, it was, single supplier. Um, you're kind of stuff always seemed very expensive. Um, and you know, you don't want to go down a road where you have everything. But I mean, to come back to the earlier point, you know, I don't think we should be too afraid of, yeah, having a Siemens and Allen Bradley plant in our ecosystem, and putting it together and saying, yeah, that'll work, and I don't care because I'm actually pulling the data in here, and the SCADA doesn't even communicate with the PLC anymore. Um, if you look at any of my architecture drawings, and I can share them there. You see everything's a gateway into a middle. I'll show you some here that I was doing. I was playing around with, and they're
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
fun.
Please do.
I think. Let's see now if I can get the right. Oh, we get, we get the right. So I love. So
Yeah, you can compare my drawings
sharing.
versus
Hopefully it'll come up
Mark's
in a sec.
drawings here.
So can I zoom out? I love a scalar draw, which is what this is. And what I love about it is you can set. Oh, I've gone out too far here. Um, I think that's where I saw
Well,
it
it looks like
first.
you've been borrowing some stuff from
And so
Jeremy.
so I no, 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 not at all. I was
Oh,
looking
okay.
for. I
All
saw the
right.
way he drew it,
Jeremy's been
and
stealing it
I
from
went,
you.
oh yeah. And then I think I happened to find he had a link, and that's where I came across the software. But what I like about it, and you'll laugh, is when you select a box, there's a sloppiness factor. So you can change it so that the lines are more wavy and more cartoony, which isn't really working for some reason with the now. When you put something on paper and you give it to somebody, they think, well, this is the way it has to be. And a lot of the time I was doing drawings, whether this was when I was working as an engineer with other engineers or working part of a team, I was like, here's an idea I've had. What do you think? Give me some feedback. Let's see where I've gone wrong. So that was what I liked about it, to be able to be a bit more like a hand sketch than, you do it in a drawing software where everything's crisp, and then it seems very final. But I suppose I drew it here to
Right.
kind of say, and if I
Right.
zoom out a tiny bit, that it was to tell a story. This is, I think, what a lot of plants are at, where you've got your ERP and you've got people, and there's a lot of paper and data entry that takes the information from the ERP down to the plant floor and back up. And everything we're trying to do is to get rid of those people. That's all we're trying to do.
Right.
And if I go a little to the left, the way we were doing it and the way I did it, and what broke people, is, we connected our SCADAs, we connected our MES, and everything was point to point. And then we brought in something like business intelligence. We had loads of connections, and we couldn't get the data. And even if you had a consistent naming structure throughout your system, so your data made sense to someone, you know, it still became unworkable. And how do you add in? I was trying to show this once in a set in a PowerPoint, and I drew it, and then the next step was to draw in machine learning, and I was going, I can't draw it. I can't get it in a meaningful way into my standard stack type architecture. Forget it. So I said, right.
Right.
And that was the beginning of my sort
Right.
of, there's got to be a better way.
Right.
We're doing this wrong. If you know, and the other thing about this approach is there's huge data loss. You get about 10% of the data coming up to SCADA, and out of the SCADA, only about 10% it goes to the MES. So you've really got to hunt. So what I was kind of saying then in the others, the architectures that I suppose I actively use and I actively think about is you've put in your broker at the middle. You know, this is we're going to do a proof of concept. It's going to be all free. I don't want to spend anything on licenses. This is I get the 2 interns and put them at it for the summer, and see what they come up with.
Right.
But I have an OT gateway that gets my data in from OT. I have an IT gateway that pulls my data in, and then I have some functionality. I have my ops sort of data ops center. I have some operator screens that I may make for interfacing. That's a bit hard to do on Node-RED, to be fair, but doable. I'm going to use Grafana, and I'm going to use my timescale as my historian. I mean, that's a free system that you can just build. And the point of these drawings when I drew them first was to say, well, you can take the same structure, and this is Ignition can do everything. And this is, you've got one plant, small plant. Ignition can be your IT and OT gateway. Your Ignition can do your data ops and do your calculations and things. You can do your operator screens. You can use a historian. You can use the Ignition for reporting. And actually, I should have Ignition as well, because you can do that for your broker as well. It's what I call Ignition does everything. And it does. But I think if you think of Ignition as a single block, people will take shortcuts, and that not everything is going into the broker, and there's reporting systems that are taking the tags directly. And that means you can't use them for other things, which is, to me, I want that the ERP can get anything from anywhere, that it doesn't have to set up a connection to it. But then, I suppose, you can take the same idea, and where you have a bigger plant, you can start to bring in the sort of the real magic UNS players, and there's other ones as well. But you can still have Ignition doing some. You can HiBite doing more data ops. HiBite can kind of structure your communications with your ERP, your gateway, and you start to use Power BI, and you start to use Canary, and you do all these. But the point I had been trying to make to kind of the person there was that it's the same approach. It's a standard architecture. You are being standardized in all of these if you're a little bit careful about it. I was making this drawing to have a discussion and maybe prove a point with someone. I was saying that we tend to be moving from, in a lot of plants where you have systems for managing the business process in your ERP, and you have machines, and it's all paper and people between them. And we're trying to get rid of that, and we're moving. And there's a kind of a system out there, or a template, where I think we touched on this earlier, people get hung up on what's the right software to use. And I'm kind of going, well, look, if you have a system, these are systems where there's one where it's all free, and we're using Node-RED and Grafana, but we could also use Ignition in the same place that, in the same functionality. We're going to use Ignition to give us that functionality, and we have a bit of a licensing cost, but it's a lot cheaper than, and less functional and performant than if we have to go and start to use, some of the real powerhouses and HiBite and Power BI and Canary and stuff. And now we're paying more and we're getting more, but we've the same common architecture. We've the same fundamental bit, because I don't like when people talk about the stack, because to me the concept of an automation stack is dead. Stop talking about it. There's functionality that we need to put places, and where's the best place for it? thinking about a stack doesn't help us solve problems. You know, OE can go on a skater. Why not? Both are code repositories. Ignition kind of proves this in that it breaks across it breaks across stacks. Yeah, okay, ERP is a bit separate to everything else, but it's really, I think, become, you've IT, you've OT. If you're putting in a system and you want to be able to buffer data, it can go in the PLC, it can go in their platform. You can make your own in Node-RED. What's the best solution for it? Why not have your historian, which is a old school historian, and also an influx DB where you're passing information in and out as you need it? What's the best way to solve the problem? Yeah,
And
there's people.
I would make an argument
Yeah.
that it's whatever's can be supported, right? It's whatever. I mean, like here in Texas versus another location versus another some other location, and your budget, right? So those have to be
Absolutely.
factored in. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's maintainability. There's a whole life cycle for everything, and you've got the design, you've got the development, you've got the operation, you've got the support. So it all has to be supported. And
Right.
back to the point, so when if someone asks me what PLC to put in Ireland, I go, well, put in Siemens and Bradley because you'll get someone to fix it. Put in a Wago Codesys, it'll be a bit harder. You'll be getting one of the guys who does Siemens to figure it out.
Yeah.
You save yourself 50 quid.
Right. We had a chat a few months ago with a customer, and we kind of reviewed our batching system with them, and he was like, well, it can't be that every 7 years we swap out our SCADA system for another SCADA system. Can I have your programmers provide the same functionality that you did inside of Ignition with my 90s SCADA system and Wonderware InTouch that we installed, almost 30 years ago? And this is like, first of all, I just don't have any of the programmers. I mean, like this, some of these things have been built before they were born. So anyway, it's and then I have to help out, right? So then it's like, I have to dust off the cobwebs and whatnot. So yeah, this is very fascinating with where we're going and what can be supported, and then we also have to keep modern because that's the programming speed at which we're learning all these different types of different software. So it's really interesting.
And there's probably a big risk out there for the industry. All of these new products that are great and are coming along mightn't be there in 5 years. And there will be some big players that we're talking about that we think are there who will surprisingly not be. I was reading an article and it was about the console wars, kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s when the PlayStation 1 and came out. And there was a load of consoles that I hadn't even heard of or remembered. And you're kind of going, oh, yeah. And I think we're in a point in the industry where you do have to be a bit careful. And that's why I'd be a bit conservative. And I wouldn't, I don't want to recommend something that's really bleeding edge. Because,
right.
Or there's things which are, and I don't want to name any products here because it might seem like I think they particularly are bad, or there's something wrong with them, and it's not. But there's some that have proved really well in one area, but I don't know how well that will translate over. To if you might be going from a high-speed manufacturing to a more workstation sort of orientated place, or vice versa. Or you've got something that's great for batch processes and they're moving out and they're trying to expand in, and it doesn't work so well for discrete. But I think in 5 years' time we'll be having a chat like this and we'll be going, oh yeah, remember them? They were supposed to be great. and there will be people who've put them in who've had to pull them out and put, okay, some of them will get bought and they'll get put in, and you go, yeah, I didn't see that coming. And some of them will be because they expanded too fast and they were so popular and they just couldn't keep up and something fell over, and one of these big evil players who sometimes get talked about will end up buying them and it'll get pushed into their bit. So yeah, I think there's going to be interesting times ahead in the solutions that are there.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't
I've
like to
got
pick a winner.
Go ahead.
Why don't we take a moment to say RIP to Bedrock?
Oh yeah.
I'm not.
It may not have made it to your part of the world, but it was a controller that was catching a lot of ground, and
Okay.
they finally just came and said, we're closing our doors. Thanks.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm sure they did some massive systems out there in the world. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then as far as like approaches, we talked about like choosing a lot of different products. I have one customer who chose a lot of different HMIs, and you can make this argument, but HMIs are pretty powerful sometimes, and sometimes you can get away with piecemealing certain areas or certain sections of a plant just with HMIs alone. Obviously, Magellan over here, Seymour over here, Redline over here, and it's just hard to centralize all kinds of other stuff. So, and now we're going in and trying to build a SCADA system for it, and trying to remove it. It has turned out to be somewhat difficult, but yeah, these are. Go ahead.
Yeah, it doesn't always work. It often doesn't work out as well as you might think, And sometimes that's just the people. You now have to have someone who can understand it all. And if you, let's say you have 2 top-class maintenance techs, they now have to learn 4 systems instead of getting really good at one. You'll have to do different approaches. Yeah, I mean, your system should be able to take anything, but that doesn't mean you will do everything.
Yeah, we can talk about this. Mark, do you ever find yourself building something beyond what the customer is ready for?
Yes, I mean, I think
because I had one customer we were doing an MES project with, and of course, it's just like sometimes when the customer hasn't been where you've been, obviously, or have done multiple MES projects, they don't know how they're going to solve problems. So our solution at this time was to take as much thought that they could provide, come up with some types of suggestions, whatever the case is. But I can clearly tell you the customer was, when given this tool, we wanted to monitor how they were going to solve problems and what tools out of our suite that they were using and which ones they weren't. And so we can try to change our direction of what we wanted to provide. I would say this, though, I mean, it assumes that they've already got people that want to, as we're pumping a lot of data and visualization to them, they're clearly becoming like, big data analysis type people. It's a lot for them. And they don't hire another individual to full time do this. So, go ahead.
I think so. And I mean, you always see, or definitely you always see when you put in a project and now you give someone all this information and the first 2 weeks they don't look at it. It is too much. And then they start to get into it and then they find they can solve a problem. Now, I think as an integrator and as that technical expertise, we need to tell them, well, this problem you mentioned is how you're going to solve it, and show them explicitly. I think the training that's given on how to use reporting systems, people put them in and they never teach them, well, this is how you use it and this is how you solve your problem. But it's also, there's a real, a customer doesn't know what a good MES looks like, or they don't know what a good way to solve a problem with an MES is because they've never built one. Um, it's a bit like, I don't know what a good fuel injection system's like. I mean, I know they exist, and I know I need my fuel injected, but after that, and I think a lot of integrators, or certain integrators, some integrators, or will take what a customer asks for and give them exactly what they ask for. And they'll never say, you know what? We did that for another customer and it didn't actually solve the problem. We had to do this. Do you want this? Or that's a better way of doing it. And I was working kind of for a client kind of with an integrator, and that was kind of, they were going, would they then, like, we don't know what good looks like. You tell us what good looks like here. That's what we want. And that's something that, I mean, if you can bring that as an integrator, and I mean, when I work as an architect, that's part of what you're trying to bring. This is what a good system is. These are some, here are some general guidelines that we should always follow because they're gonna lead better. But as well, the little things you go, do you know what? That would really, really work out. That would work out well. I had one plant where, we put on the top all of the tanks. There was about 20 tanks in the plant and a spark line of the tank. So you could see the level and the spark line. You could tell exactly what's going in the whole plant just in the banner. And, you could then tell someone else going, actually, we did this somewhere else. And I know people, and there was people who worked on that project with me who will never tell another customer, here's a really good idea we had in another place, doing this. So, if more integrators and more engineers working for integrators could cry and say, here's what good looks like, guys. Or,
Right.
we don't want to tell the customer they're wrong. It can be precarious. Right. You can be in for one job. You're building something and then you're going to be gone and you don't want to annoy them, or you're building something, you're hoping you're going to get the next job. You're not in a position of power.
Right. Have you ever seen some of the newer modern systems that allow you to simulate everything, so you can invite the customer into your development area to where they can kick the tire and everything else? Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that sells it because
but I mean, it's great when you've got I think it works well. If you have a machine and you're selling a machine, you're going to sell 500 of them. Yeah, no brainer. You should have it. It's much harder when you're building a bespoke and you're kind of going, because there could be a lot of work on it. There really can. Sometimes you have to take shortcuts with it. I've built full simulation systems, and they're great and they're fabulous. And then someone moves a valve and you've got to reprogram it. And then someone moves two valves, it doesn't tell you. And then you come back. So, I mean, it's an idea I love, and I kind of, but in practice, it's always been poor execution, I think. I don't know. Have you? I mean, have you seen that? Is it something that I mean, is it something you do? Is it something you see with vendors that you can do it, or what? What do you think? Because I mean, I know there was once when we were trying, and this was 10 years ago, and we're trying to simulate, just the batch process and showing the SCADA and stuff. And we said, look, you know what? Let's just make it a timed PowerPoint. It's going through a cycle anyway. That's all we're going to program. For the people who are looking at it, it's giving them the same value, and it takes us a day to put together, and it looks well, rather than 4 or 5 weeks. So I suppose that's my concern over it. The cost to value, not that there isn't value, but there's huge costs, especially in a complicated bespoke system.
Right. If it can be built in while you're building the things, it'd be one thing, and blended in. Yeah. And there's way to do it. But you're right. There is an added cost to it, and there is an
And
added cost to trying to get. We use a random number generator on our batching system, and so then we can kind of
okay,
we have valves that like actuate at different times, and of course we found a small. I mean, it was a lot of effort, but we were able to find some unique little problems because if you do build a generic simulation, we were getting precise the exact same batch every time, right? It was perfect every
yes,
whatever the case is. We introduced the simulation with a random number generator and gave it a little bit of a chaos to it. Sure enough,
yeah,
we found a little couple of glitches here and there because it wasn't, the scanning time of the VLC was a little different anyway. And then, of course, when you do actually go out on the site, you'll find even yet again something else that you didn't think of that the simulation doesn't have. And so, anyway, but it eliminated a lot of silly mistakes.
yeah. I mean,
So the day
I think
the day is gone. Go ahead.
I think in 10 years it'll be 100% standard. You'll be kind of going, if someone isn't doing it, it's still at a point where, yeah, if I work at some, and when an integrator says to me, yeah, I'm doing it, I go, right, okay, these guys know what they're talking about. Because, they're, but I don't necessarily think less, I think more of someone who does it rather than I think less of someone who isn't. And there's lots of reasons I understand why people wouldn't be. So yeah, I mean, it is coming, but it's a bit like getting into that digital twin conversation where it kind of becomes just a mess, and you kind of go, so. But it comes down to, I think, something we never talk about here, or we'll never, people never talk about. Maybe here you could do a podcast. This is the future. The testing. What's the test
Yeah.
plan? How are we going to go about it? And you're never going to get everything. You're never going to think of all the problems you can have. But you're trying to reduce it. You're trying to go about. You want to have a structured process.
Right.
And if anything you can use that's going to find a problem in the plant, before you go to the plant, is worth it. Absolutely. I suppose
Right.
a lot of what I've done in my career is modifications to existing stuff. So, it's a bit different. But I've had SCADAs where, this is for a natural gas transmission station, and the new PLC was coming, and we brought the SCADA to that, and they had a full simulator for everything on the back end for, in the guys. And yeah, it makes sense there, absolutely. It's something that, and maybe I'm just behind here, but I'm going, yeah, it's not always. I don't know if if the cost of the effort's always there, but you have to do something when you go to test it to try and simulate and try and make sense and try and make it, as I said, try and find, as I said, you'll always have the perfect batch until you come in. That's actually, that random number generator is, what happens if this valve closes late? What happens if that valve closes late? Where are we going to go with that? No, that's.
Yeah, and we even had to ran into this problem where we did a simulation on SoftLogics. Are you familiar with SoftLogics? It's
Yes.
Alan Bradley's old, obviously, PLC, but it's, whatever. So we ran and developed everything using that. And sure enough, the 3 days before we were going to do a commission, we were like, let's throw it on the actual PLC that it's actually going to be on. And sure enough, we got some different results when we threw it on there. So it was quite surprising. So we had to learn, the lesson was, to obviously throw it on the hardware that it was going to reside on sooner than 3 days before. We solved the problem, but again, it's simulation is a really big deal, and getting this exact same hardware, the exact same firmware, and the same VM, and all kinds of stuff. Just trying to eliminate a lot of this nuances and go from there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know it's getting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would always have like said if I'm programming and I'm going to bring something and a panel's being built and the PLC is going into a panel, but I have the PLC on my desk and that's the PLC that's going to go to site. You know, it, you do it on even the same model PLC and you get there
Absolutely.
and we firmware versions. Okay, no, that doesn't happen. I mean, we were doing one thing. It was a Kepware connection over OPC to an Allen Bradley PLC, and it wouldn't work with firmware version 16.4, and we had version 16.4, and we couldn't upgrade that anymore. That was because it was an IT-led project and there was change controls and was saying, well, we have to change the PLC, and it was going back and a few days later, the maintenance guy said, "Oh yeah, we had to replace that PLC because it faulted during the night." Job done.
Johnny, any stories on this? Anyway.
No, you've got to listen to some of the stuff I've been working on here recently. So
yeah. My funny story on this is my dad used to be a teacher. He used to go on these robotic teams after school type deal, and then sometimes they would have conferences, and the kids would take a donut and put it onto something or steal something away from. Anyway, they would change it up every once in a while, and sometimes he wasn't. It's chaotic, right? So kids running around and everything else, whatever.
Yeah.
You gotta put everything on chargers and whatnot. Anyway, he had a scenario where all of a sudden, like, the kid places the robot into the arena. He starts going, and it's everyone's yelling and screaming and everything else, whatever the case is. And sure enough, the robot's battery died, and it was they forgot to put it on the charger. It's not like the kid can't control this joystick like the other guy. It's just the fact that it's just chaotic, and they just forgot to put it on the battery on the charger. But you have to eliminate. It could be as basic as that, but you have to eliminate all these like little small nuances. It seems small, it seems petty, but boy, once you're out in the field and it brings you down, it's an awful feeling. So anyway.
But it's like, I mean, I say up there and you're there and I need a different cable. And where's that cable? And this PLC has to have this cable, or, someone's installed something and, there's no plug on a panel, or, you're kind of going.
You're lost because of some really, petty stuff. Yeah.
And you spend a day finding an electrician to put a socket on or to do something like that, and you're kind of going, and then you're telling a customer, I was here all day and you're paying me an hourly rate, guys, and I was chatting to an electrician and I couldn't do anything else. And you go and you tell them 10 times, this has to be done, this has to be done, and you try and send them a checklist, and there, and that's not to blame customers. We do the same thing, and it's the silly stuff, and you try and break it down, you try and not have it happen, and then it's something else you didn't think of.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I know it's getting late for you. Let's end this here. Anyway, it was wonderful to have you on here.
Thanks a million, guys. It was great fun.
Yeah. And we'll need you to come back on and everything else. I'm kind of curious to see how everything's. I don't know what you're working on right now, but are you working on any kind of project right now?
So I just finished. We're not recording anymore. Got this bit. So I just finished up with the